somewhere in between. Thanks for being here for today's webinar, How to Motivate Your Board Members to Help in Fundraising. And my name is Stephen Shattuck, and I'm a VP of Marketing here at Bloomerang, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. And today our guest is Gail Perry. Very happy to have you here, Gail. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, thank you.
And for any of you who don't know Gail, which I doubt any of you don't know Gail, she's an international fundraising consultant. She's a trend spotter, a speaker, a trainer, and a thought leader. She has worked with literally thousands of board members, nonprofit leaders, and fundraising staff to boost them with the fundraising skills and inspiration to change the world. Gail is a past president of the Triangle Chapter of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and they actually recently awarded her Outstanding Fundraising Executive of the Year. She launched her own fundraising career at Duke University, and she also directed the fundraising program at the Keenan Flagger School of Business at UNC Chapel Hill. She holds an MBA and a BA with honors in English from UNC Chapel Hill and is also a CFRE. So, Gail, this is really quite an honor to have you here, so thanks again for joining us.
Oh, come on. I'm a fan of y'all. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, this will be fun. So what we're going to do is, for the next half hour or so, Gail's going to run through her presentation. And afterwards, we're going to spend some time in an interactive Q&A session. So feel free to send any questions through the chat box right there on your webinar screen. I'll see those, and Gail will see those. And we'll try to answer just as many as we can a little later on this afternoon. And just so everyone knows, we are recording this presentation. So if you have to leave early, or maybe you want to review this content with someone else in your office or just yourself later on, look for an email from me later this afternoon. I'll be sending you the recording, and you'll also receive the slides from Gail a little later on as well. So I'm not going to waste any more time. Gail, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Thanks so much. And you can see a little bit about me on the slide right here. And of all of my career feats, the most important thing I want you to know is my Twitter handle, because I'm very active on Twitter. And if you are, we can hang out and play together, have some fun. And also, I was wondering if everybody, we've got 66 people right now, how about typing into the chat box your organization and where you're located? I would love to know just who all is here, and it's so much fun to see who's here from around the country and the world sometimes too, because I know Bloomerang has an international. We've got I love Big Brothers, Big Sisters. I love symphonies, theater and arts organizations. Oh, wow, autism, cool, YMCA, yay, Start at Westminster, Graduate School, Hearts and Homes, literacy, although I love, of course, there's not very many nonprofit. Girls Are on the Run, hey, how are y'all doing? Jewish Federation of Delaware, I've done a bunch of training for the Jewish organizations. Charlottesville Public Housing, I'm going to be up there for a wedding this summer. Sustainable Nutrition, School of Acrobatics and New Circus Arts, fun, Jeff. You've got the most fun cause so far. Healthcare Foundation, WestCare in Las Vegas, welcome, William. Catholic radio station in Boston. Fun. Well, terrific. I really thank you for sharing this, and I hope you can probably see my pencil. I can create some real trouble here with this pencil. I'm just learning how to use it. So let me tell you a little bit more about myself, my story. I was a fundraising consultant, and I was so frustrated with these boards I was working with. They would say they would, and then they wouldn't, right? And I'm sure you have run into that situation. And I just, what I did was that I hired an organizational development shrink. He was a bona fide shrink to be my business coach, to teach me a different way to work with boards. And he taught me sort of a team-building, leadership skills, total psychological approach, and based on motivational theory and group process. And so these ideas I'm going to share with you are not traditional board development 101, and I think that's why I'm so popular, because they're realistic, they're practical, and they're very, they're kind to both staff and board members. Now, another question I want to ask you all, I hope there's some board members joining me today. And if you are a board member, and would you just type in the chat, I'd love to know how many board members we have, and I want to say thank you. because I think there's a special place in heaven for nonprofit board members. And I want to know that I am going to be poking fun at the institution of nonprofit boards, and I don't mean it personally. I want you to have some fun with me because I think that board members are having a tough time because of the way they're treated by the staff. So this is going to be pro-board member point of view. So thank you so much. I see a few board members fessing up here that they're joining us. And by the way, this is and I do board retreats and workshops around the country, among other things. And this is the Southern Appalachian Highlands Trust in Flat Rock, North Carolina. And they were nervous to death about a board retreat about fundraising. They didn't know what to think, and now look at them at the end. They're just fired up and ready to go. And so this is the work of transformation that I want to teach you how you can do for your board if you don't want to bring me in or bring another facilitator in. But I want to start with a story. And this is an amazing story that has many teaching aspects about it. I have a friend in Raleigh named Cece, and she was the chair of the board of the Raleigh Little Theater. And when I was writing my book, I asked Cece, I interviewed her as board chair, how do you feel about fundraising? Are you involved? What's working? What's not? And she said, fundraising. No. She said, I told them that I'd be board chair, but I'd do anything but fundraising. And she's like hyperventilating and throwing up. And I said, okay, back up. And I said, well, Cece, now let me ask you another question. What if you were the ambassador from the Raleigh Little Theater over to Progress Energy, our big utility company here in town? I said, what if you didn't have to ask for money, but you were in charge of the relationship? You were like the account manager. She said, I would have so much fun. She said, I could give them free tickets. I could bring them to cast parties. I could take them to backstage. And she was smiling and laughing. And then she said, I wouldn't mind going along on the solicitation if I had done all that. And I thought, Lord have mercy, lady, you just told me you would never touch fundraising with a 10-foot pole, and here you are volunteering and offering to go. And so what are the learnings from this? The learnings are that if we don't make fundraising about money, and instead we make fundraising about developing the relationship and having fun with the relationship, then board members will jump right in and have a blast and help us in lots of ways. And I'm going to be bringing this theme up over and over and over from different angles. And so just I call upon the great Albert Einstein to share with us that no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. And we could have a lot of fun with our nonprofit boards and applying this thought to them. But I want to say that our situation with nonprofit board members and their reluctance and nervousness about fundraising was created from a certain level of consciousness, and if you shift the way you're thinking, you can solve the problem. And so let's have some fun. Is this your board? You know, I think that board meetings are sometimes like all these Egyptian statues, frozen in time, calcified, and everybody is so self-conscious. And by the way, I show these slides to all my board retreats, and people love them. They laugh them. All board members laugh. And one time I was doing a presentation, and some lady in the audience raised her hand, and she said, I know the person second from the left. That person doesn't have a head, so she must have a real stone-faced board member. And you know, is your board bored? You know, are you having boring meetings? Because if you have boring meetings, you're going to have a board. And if you have a board, I don't think a board is going to get excited about doing anything, much less fundraising. So it's important as staff and nonprofit board leaders that we focus on giving our board members a terrific experience. We can change our consciousness, just like Einstein said, approach the whole idea of the board members from a different angle, and we'll get amazingly different results. So listen, this is board members. This is what happens when you raise the fundraising word to board members, right? They think it's the F word, and it's like the deer in headlights. What are we going to do? And lots of times I show this, and people really die laughing because it's true. Because board members don't understand fundraising. And so they're making up all these whole myths about fundraising, and let's just talk about some of the myths. And, you know, before I was in fundraising myself, I thought these exact same things. So this is what somebody who's not familiar, most of us on the call are professionals, we're well trained, we do this all the time, but we're dealing with volunteers who don't they do have a completely different perspective when we mention the F word. First of all, they think it's begging. You know, they think that this is the 10 cup syndrome. Please help me, I have nothing. You know, the beggar on the street. And then they envision themselves begging. Lots of people laugh when I show them this slide. You know, they envision themselves, oh, I have to go raise sponsorships, and this is what it's going to be like for me. You know, they think fundraising is making cold calls. They think fundraising is asking strangers for money. Strangers for money. And we know in fundraising, well-trained professionals, it's not about the ask because it's about the relationship. It's not about strangers. I never believe in making cold calls, right? And I would certainly never send my volunteers out to make cold calls. And it's never about money, right? And I'll talk about that in just a sec, too. And, you know, board members are thinking that fundraising is rejection. And again, I've got these wonderful, good-hearted people who want to help my cause. Why would I send them out to have such a difficult and sad experience? Not good. And as I thought about what board members are really, what they think when we approach them with the F word or with fundraising, I did come to realize that there is a dark side to fundraising, and people don't talk about this a lot either. But the dark side is when it's all about money, you know, and when it's not about the kids or the project or the wonderful work we're doing in the world. And I love this picture because it's, I don't know which face is worse. People, you mentioned fundraising and you get these looks on people's faces. And it doesn't have to be that way, and I think it's our job. I'm going to show you some ways to make it not about money, and this is going to bring a relief to a lot of people. You know, also, board members are not well educated about fundraising. You know, all of these things that I'm bringing to you are training opportunities, you know, and board members are smart people. They like learning new stuff. So I would suggest staff members, you come up there and you trot in front of your board meeting and you show this PowerPoint and you do blah, 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 and there are a few questions, and the board members are thinking, oh, well, that's interesting. I'm glad she or he's doing such a great job. But board members would actually love to know more about how fundraising works. And this is a great place to start, is the cost per dollar raised of various fundraising strategies. Because I would suggest to you that if your board members understand your fundraising program and the strategies you employ, they're going to be more helpful, and they're not going to bother you with questions that are off topic. And we could spend a lot of time just talking about this slide, but I wanted to be sure to include it in here so that you can have it and you can use this as a basis of discussion for your own board. And here are a couple of other slides that are very useful, and I use them all the time when I'm training boards or working with boards, is that board members don't understand the whole fundraising adventure. But I would warrant that many people, many board members do have some sales background, and if they look at this fundraising cycle I'm showing on the screen, they recognize that this is the classic sales cycle. And yes, I was trained by Xerox in the 90s in professional selling skills, and I use it every day in my fundraising. And so the takeaway from this particular slide that lays the fundraising cycle out in terms of sales cycle is that you're beginning to show board members that fundraising is not all about the ask. You see, you're beginning to show them that there are other activities. This is really key. There are other activities they can do that they can be very supportive in fundraising and will directly impact the bottom line, so that when you ask, your prospect is ready to be asked and your prospect loves you. So when I'm working with board members, I take solicitation. I know, you take a deep breath and listen to this. I take solicitation off the plate And I say you do not have to ask for money if you do not want to, but every board member does have a job to help. And you can make thank you phone calls, you can host tours, you can welcome guests at an event. Every board member has a job and let's all pitch in. And when you approach board members like that, they're gung-ho. And then like my friend Cece at the very beginning, if they're involved in the relationship development, then it is not awkward to go along on the solicitation. But I would say it is awkward. You're involved in cultivating this major donor, blah, 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 but you want to bring a board member in at the last minute, to help with the ask. Well, the board member doesn't know this person. It's awkward. So, again, use a different consciousness, approach this from a different mindset. Make it fun for your board members and lighten up and give them other jobs that don't involve soliciting, and then they will warm up. Oh, gosh, there's something wrong with this slide. Goodness, what has happened to this? I use this slide all the time, and this area, I'm having fun with this area. This is not supposed to be in here, this black quarter here. But this pie chart, even though it's a little bit messed up here, and when I'm gonna get the list of participants, and I'm gonna email you my original PowerPoint, and I'll fix the slide. But this slide represents one of my great ahas when I wrote my book. And what I did was that I took the fundraising cycle here and I broke it into a pie chart that showed how much time and energy we spend in each part of the fundraising cycle. And I would suggest that the ask right here is one little tiny part. Let's see if I can draw this pie chart. How's that? Here's the pie chart. The ask is one little tiny moment, and we spend a lot of time cultivating. We spend a bit of time identifying, and we do a lot of thanking. And, of course, you know the definition of sustainable fundraising? Sustainable fundraising is when you do such a great job thanking here that the thanking prepares the donor for the next ask. And you can short circuit the fundraising cycle with your donors. And so your core group of supporters that you really want to sick your board members on to love a lot is nothing but thanking and acknowledging and stewarding. And we can talk some more about that as we go forward. So I apologize for this slide. You can see that I made the attempt to do we identify, we involve, we ask, and we thank. But this mysterious black quarter has crept into my chart. But now, here, board members, I'm making a list of all the things that board members do not understand about fundraising. And my point is that they will help you more in fundraising if they understand more about how it works. And I would suggest to you, good, Richard says, oh, hey, Richard, how are you doing? He and I are Twitter buddies. You can ask too much, but you can never thank enough. Yes, yes, yes. And so, again, I'm from the South. I've raised millions of dollars, but I'm from the soft sell school of fundraising, where we have low pressure, but we have very high intention, right? But along the list of things that board members don't understand about fundraising, they don't understand whether they're losing or gaining donors. They don't understand this whole issue of retention, which, of course, Bloomerang is all about, and I'm so excited that Bloomerang is beating the drum of retention. And this is one of my favorite slides from their series of infographics that you need to really grab. I would take their infographics about retention, and I would show them to your board, and I would have a discussion. Now, this is important for me to share. If you want to do some fundraising training with your board, do not make a presentation. You put this up there on the PowerPoint or put this a handout, and you say, what are your impressions of this slide? What does this mean to us? And you force them to talk about it. I think one of our huge challenges is, and I do an enormous amount of training, and I study adult learning like crazy, and studies show that adults can only handle about maximum of 10 minutes being talked to before they lose interest. And so if you want your board members to really understand fundraising, you've got to get them to talk about it, which is fun. It's fun for them, and it's easier on you. And I could spend a lot of time talking about how to do these presentations, but I want to go on. Board members also don't understand who's doing what in the fundraising office. and they don't know what their role is in fundraising. So this is a long list of things that you can begin to stage educational conversations with your board about, and I'm willing to bet they would really enjoy it. They want to know this stuff. They want to feel educated about it. And lastly, they don't know what their real job is as board members. And I'll tell you, everybody I know, well, not everybody, but I work with a lot of organizations, oh, we have these expectations, and everybody signs them, but then nobody does them. And I go on a board, give me these expectations, and I go, these expectations are weird. Sure, I support the mission. Sure, I can come to meetings, but what else do you want me to do? So one of the things I love to do when I'm working on a board retreat is that I like to have the board members talk about what their job needs to be. You know, what is their job? And then I ask them, what are the top 3 issues this board needs to deal with in the coming year? And they're all over that. They're all over that, and they're ready to dive in. Now, moving on, I've just finished this long, long list of things that board members would love to know more about in fundraising. I've poked some holes in the myths that they're making up about fundraising, and these, again, are educational opportunities. But here, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, you want different results, change yourself. Change yourself. Make it fun and lighten up. And so now here are my strategies for opening up your board members and motivating them. The first thing I like to do is that I like to ask board members why they care. And this, again, this is a lovely picture. This is that Appalachian Highlands Land Trust that I showed you the picture at the beginning. And the lady on the left is a very formidable and famous environmentalist, well-connected city leader. And she's chair of the board, and the young man is an heir to a very prominent family in North Carolina who has a foundation. Yay! We love all of them. But when I stage board members in a Mingle exercise, going around the room telling each other why they care, and it is a very, very powerful conversation. And when I send you my follow-up email, because I've got everybody's list, I'm going to send you a couple of articles on my blog about how to set up this Mingle exercise. It's easy, low-pressure practice talking about why they care. The board members love this. And what it really is it dips them in their passion for the cause. And I never talk about fundraising, ever, ever, without doing this particular exercise. It only takes 10 minutes. And you get them out of their seats. They're talking to each other about why they care. It's a team-building exercise. It's fun for the board members. It builds energy in the room. And guess what else they're doing? They're practicing their personal elevator speech. Yay! And the number one thing we need to train board members on is how to talk about us, how to talk about our organization. And I had a board member come to me once, and she said, Gail, when I have a chance about our organization, what do I say? And I said, talk about why you think it's important. Tell your own personal story. She said, oh, okay, I can do that. And so, board studies show that board members want fundraising training that is practical and that is hands-on. They do not want to be presented to. They do not want to sit passively while you present the PowerPoint. And so when I do a board retreat, it is hands-on, practicing, engaging, working with them, and because that's the only way you're going to get adult learners and adult decision makers to embrace this powerful concepts. And this is the only way you can get them to get over their myths. But I can't overemphasize to you how powerful this conversation is to ask people why they care and to ask them to share with your board members over and over and over. And I want to show you, this is, I don't know if Laurie Taylor is joining us today. She's a brilliant fundraiser in North Carolina. But I sent her an email and I said, Laurie, we did this board retreat. Did it land? Did anything work? And she said, oh, I'm putting some of your ideas into action. And she said, no, I know. She had read my book, and I asked her what did she pull out of my book that was useful. And so she was all over this concept about asking them to talk about why they care. And I'm not going to read this whole thing, but she said she asked her trustees, what legacy do you want to leave from serving on this board? And she said, you would have thought I'd opened the floodgates. And the board members poured out their hearts. One man cried. And she said it was the best meeting that she'd had in 3 years because she had started in this way. So I tell you, it's very powerful stuff, and I want you to pay attention to the last lines of this email. I'm quoting directly. She said, Gail, I can't change them, but I can change me. And so what is our learning from that? It's like Einstein, shift your consciousness or shift your direction. It's just like your children or your spouse or your work people, colleagues. If you shift the way you are approaching them, you get different results. And so I would say to you, my friends and colleagues listening, that you have more power than you think over your ability to motivate and lead this wonderful group of people called board members. And they're very willing to respond to new energy and new ideas if you approach it right. And whenever I do this exercise with these board members and the elevator speech, and when I'm doing a live training out, there are 4 parts to the elevator speech, and we go through those. And board members love it, because what I'm doing is that I'm showing them how to open the door without being pushy. And they, you know, of course, anybody would want to know, how do I open the door without being pushy? And I tell them that they get to sneeze on everybody they know. And the sneezing is a concept from Seth Godin called unleashing the idea virus, you know, that ideas are like viruses and they're contagious. And so board members become sneezers, right? Yay! And they laugh. Most medical foundations don't like it when I use this metaphor. But it's very powerful, because I'm saying to board members that you sneeze on everybody, and the ones who are interested are going to let you know they're interested. And that's an easy way to deal with my role as a board member, being an advocate in the community for my organization. And, you know, good old Ralph Waldo Emerson said, nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. And so part of this whole elevator speech training is to model for them the kind of energy they need to have. And, once they start talking about their cause, they need to know how to engage somebody in a conversation, and they need to know when to shut up. And so part of my training is to show them that they can take the elevator speech and they can turn it into a conversation by saying, what are your impressions? You know, they love this stuff. They eat it up, and, you know, they get a kick out of this, knowing that they're not supposed to talk a lot about their organization. They're supposed to stop talking and let the other person talk. And that's a kinder, gentler approach. I have a blog post called The Fundraiser's Kiss of Death that you could get a big kick out of. And by the way, my website is gailperry.com, and it's also firedupfundraising.com. Both of them go to the same place. And there's a little search bar at the top and at the bottom, and you can type in some of these key phrases I'm sharing with you, and you can pull up an article that's really easy to read. And a lot of people send my articles to their board members saying, what do you think about this idea? What are your impressions? You know, what are your impressions of this idea? It's a great way to start a conversation. All right, I've spent a lot of time talking about this elevator speech and teaching your board members how to talk about your organization. That is a fundamental part of training them and motivating them, because when they start talking about why they care, they are talking themselves into being motivated. So part 2 of this deep motivational training, part 1 is letting them get in touch with their passion and teaching them how to spread their passion. Part 2 is related to data. Part 1 is emotion, part 2 is data. And so my question is what are we really raising money for? And where does the money go? And my slides, I think when we uploaded them, the headlines are a little bit off, but I hope you can read my slides okay. And so what I do is that I bring the executive director and the development director up in front of the room, and I sort of play Oprah. We sit down, we relax, and I say, well, all right, let's talk about where all this money goes. So what is our organization's budget? And the board members are sitting there thinking, what is our organization budget? Do I know? And one person will say, oh, well, it's like $1.2 million. And board members say, oh, yeah. And the board members start taking notes. And then I'll say, well, how much do we have to raise every year out of this $1 million? Oh, we have to raise $600,000. Board members are taking, you've presented them this data before, but they didn't get it before because you had them in overload with too many numbers at once. So this is a really, really, really powerful tool for spoon feeding any group of adult learners key data in a way that will land with them and that they will embrace and not forget. So I'm asking very simplistic questions one by one, and the responses dribble out, and board members are sitting on the edge of their seats. And then I say to the development director, of the $600,000 you need to raise every year, how much do you have to bust your butt to raise? And the development director will say, oh, we have to bust our butt to raise about $400,000. And board members really want to know how much you have to bust your butt to raise. And so then we talk about where does it go. And I'll say, why does it cost? Why do you need so much staff? So you're a Big Brothers Big Sisters organization. Why do you need staff? You're running volunteer mentors for the kids who need mentors. Because it turns out that the staff has to manage all these volunteers. You've got to recruit the volunteers. Oh, well, why do we have to pay them some? Oh, we need insurance. Why? Oh, okay. So we're breaking the budget down into why do we need to make all these expenditures? And the board members suddenly get it, that it's where the money is going. And so these are some great questions you can ask your board members. I think I've got another one right here. Why does it cost so much, program by program? And this is my favorite slide here of all these slides. For example, I was working with the Big Brothers Big Sisters, and it turns out that it costs $1,000 per kid to be mentored a year, to be managed and mentored. And they were turning away 100 families a year who were begging for mentors for their kids, and the organization couldn't help them. So the families were leaving in tears because they were so worried about these kids of theirs, and there was no help. And so the Big Brothers Big Sisters board was afraid about having to tackle $100,000 more for these 100 kids. But you know something? They could tackle 5 kids at a time. They decided to go to the Rotary Club and say, Rotary, do y'all want to tackle 5 kids? Into the local churches and synagogues, do y'all want to tackle 5 kids? Their community tennis club, you want to underwrite a kid this year? If you break it, remember way back when I talked about not making it about money and making it about the project, this kind of discussion can help you figure out how to make it into a project and not about the money itself. I'd like to spend a little bit more time explaining it, but I think you sort of get the gist. Use the panel discussion format and ask questions one by one, so that and then your goal, of course, is to get your board members to ask questions too, and to get them really engaged in the discussion about how much does it really cost, why do we need to spend the money, and if we had another $500,000, what would we do with it? That's a very important question for everybody to know, and it keeps some staff from feeling like they're whining. It puts it in a more business-like standpoint, and so. Now, I want to go back to an earlier theme about giving your board members a terrific experience. It is up to us to make sure that they enjoy their experience on the board and they get personally a lot out of it. And that means that it's not business as usual. I think you need to liven up your board meetings. I'm not going to talk about these points, but I'll just share them with you. I have a blog post called 12 Ways to Liven Up Your Board Meetings. Look at ways to change it around to make it as interesting as possible. Give them social time. Studies show that board members want to meet the other board members, right? They want to meet them, and give them something specific to do. When I'm on a board, I don't want this blah expectation stuff. I want to know, what do I need to do to be a good board member? Tell me what you need me to do this month between now and the next board meeting. Give me one thing and I will do it. But don't give me 15 and don't be vague. I need to be managed and I need to be well-staffed. I'm really busy. If you're clear, I can deliver for you. If you're not clear, don't make me think about it. And, by the way, with these action items, I absolutely think, talking about the psychological approach, that peer pressure on the board is a huge factor in motivating people, because nobody wants to look bad in front of their colleagues. And if I know that I have to make a report in front of my colleagues, you better believe I'm going to be busting my butt to get the work done and to have the report ready. And I want to look good. And this is just human nature, right? And so again, clarify your job with the board members. Or clarify their job about what you want them to do. And so here are just a couple of ideas that I want to share with you that, again, lighten the fundraising load and make it more fun for your board members. I'm throwing a lot of different concepts to you, and I'm not explaining them thoroughly, but I hope you can get the gist of what I'm talking about. You always buy my book from Amazon at a discount. I have it all written up in there. And also, most of my book is written up in short, snippy articles on my blog. So you could really search on my blog. But I believe in focusing board members on friend making, and take soliciting off the plate. And I tell them I'd rather have die-hard friends to my cause than donors, because die-hard friends will stick with me in and out. They will do anything they can do, and they will give me money if they can. So let's concentrate on friend making, so maybe we should redefine fundraising into friend making. And, the more and more studies, the retention studies, all of the bloggers and all the latest research shows that if you slather love and attention on your donors, your donor base, your donor file, they will stick with you. So maybe you need to be treating your donors like friends, maybe like family. And board members who are nervous about asking for money can spend their wonderful time and energy there. And so here are just a couple of my favorite jobs for board members to do. I love parties. My Christmas party in Raleigh is famous. I'm having 3 parties this month at my house, goodness gracious, for different causes, for different reasons. And none of them are fundraisers, but they're all cultivation sort of events, and they all have sort of a purpose. But so board members can host small coffees or small socials to introduce their friends to the cause. One time I was a board member of the Carolina Ballet, and I had a porch party, and I invited people to come meet the new director from a porch party, and it was a wonderful, wonderful little event that opened some key doors for us. Board members can host tours. I'm a huge fan of a tour if you do it well. And lastly, and this is my favorite, one of my favorite data points in the entire lexicon of fundraising research right here. And I would actually start my whole conversation with board members with this slide. And I would say, what are your impressions of this slide? Because if board members are really systematically thanking your donors will give more money. And here's the data from Penelope Burke. And just for the recording, I'll put this down in words, is that these research projects have happened over and over in multiple-sized organizations. And what they do is that they pull a group of donors to get thank you phone calls from board members within 24 hours of receiving the gift. So it's a very, very fast turnaround. And then they test 5 months later, and they solicit both groups of donors, including the ones who didn't get the thank you call. They got all the same communications, regular paper thank you, newsletters, everything. But the ones who get the phone call, invariably, in study after study, they are giving 39% more money than the other donors. 39. And so, my friends, hooray, this is living proof that board members can directly impact the bottom line without having to ask for money. Yay! I'm going to say it again. Board members can directly impact the bottom line without having to ask for money. Yay! And so just A final thought. I'm a huge fan of The Matrix. I watch it all the time on the TV reruns. And every time Morpheus says this line, I go, oh, my God. And this line says, there's a difference. I've got a typo. There's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. And so we know the path to take, but I would suggest that taking the path and walking it is a whole nother game, and so that is my motivational push to you. My call to action to you is to try to walk the path. And so here I am with some fellow board members at my favorite board, Lillian's List, and we are fired up, ready to go, and you can create this with this is a volunteer board I'm on. You can create this board too. And just to wrap up, these are some articles on my blog that you can get a kick out of and that your board members like. Show Me the Money, How to Move from Fundraising to Fundraising. Top 10 Things to Understand About Fundraising Really Works Today is an important article to share with your board. And the elevator speech exercise for your board is a write-up about the Mingle exercise. And how to be a personal advocate for the cause. That's all about sneezing and spreading the word. So, a lot of this is already written up, and you can get more information about it. So, thank you, Christy. I'm glad you love donor-centered fundraising. I do too. That's Penelope Burt's great book. And Christy says, aren't board members often being asked to support multiple causes and organizations? I would say you don't want anybody on your board who's not going to make your organization one of their top 3 philanthropic priorities. And I would ask people when they join, tell them that that's one of our expectations, that we're among your very top group of philanthropic priorities. You don't want your board members spread too thin, do you, in terms of what they're supporting? My 3 parties this month are all for different things, and I have different roles, but I'm a little bit worried about but it's different groups of people are going to be invited too. So, but I worry sometimes about representing too many causes at once. Other questions? Stephen? Didn't play around with my yellow. Woo!
I know you should have done more with that. I'm a little disappointed.
Look, there's a question mark. There's a question mark. Look, questions. I'm not right-handed, and so this is very difficult to do with my right hand.
And sorry about your pie chart. I don't know what happened there, but you recovered quite well.
Yeah, okay, all right, Capital Campaign. Kathy, let me speak about Capital Campaign.
That's a good one.
Andrea Kilstead wrote the book on capital campaigns, and when I started out in the 90s, I clutched that campaign to my heart. And she and I have a blog site called Capital Campaign Magic, and we are doing coaching on capital campaigns virtually. And we're also writing a lot about capital campaigns, and we're doing free webinars about capital campaigns. And capital campaigns are complex, sophisticated, and I think board members have a particular role. And board members are going to be the first place you start with your board in terms of motivating them for the capital campaign is to get them to understand the strategy, the unique strategy that capital campaigns employ that will raise them millions of dollars. And we could go on and on, but that's a long and deep topic. Okay, 100% personal donations required by board members. Absolutely. I think that you need to have a fellow board member say, let's put our money where our mouth is. We all have to be giving. And I've got an article, I resurrected it on Twitter yesterday about the 7 steps to solicit your board. It was my strategy when I was a staff fundraiser that really worked for me. Casey, if you can't get board members fired up, how do you guide them to take a step down without potentially damaging a relationship? Ooh. First of all, I would buy Simone Joyeau's book called Firing Lousy Board Members and read that. But let me tell you what a friend of mine did who was the executive director of a big nonprofit here in Raleigh. They really demanded a lot of their board members, and it was a high-performing group of people. And he would go see a board member who was non-performing, and he would say to the board member, is there another way you would like to serve our organization since you haven't been able to do such and such and such, or something like that. And he said almost invariably the board member was relieved and they were feeling guilty, and they jumped at the chance to shift to a different role. It's dicey. I would say it's dicey, and you need to protect yourself politically. And the getting rid of a board member is you have to be very careful about that. And I wouldn't say I'm an expert on that. I can't see this whole question. There's a long question here from Charity.
Yeah, it looks like she's saying, as a supporter of a high school group, it's hard to keep donors beyond when their kids are in the band. Makes sense. Often the requested donation is not given by many families. We need to raise money for uniforms. So she needs to work with donors and quickly. What's a good strategy for meeting with companies for the first time?
Well, first of all, if I'm meeting with companies for the first time, I try not to make a cold call. I would start with a prospect list of contacts that we have that are acquaintances of the school or school members. So you need to first make a prospect list of companies that employs existing relationships, because you don't want to make cold calls, because cold calls are not particularly successful, right? So use a particular relationship. And how much does it cost per kid? You know, oh my gosh, we've got these 10 kids who can't afford their uniforms, and it's $100 each, and we want some, who wants to sponsor a kid in the band? I mean, kids in the band are just so exciting, and it's like a lovely cause. And I think people would jump at the chance, but you have to present it in a way that's very powerful and exciting, and use emotion. And don't make cold calls. So I'm sure that you've got some relationships. Maybe there's some vendors at the school. Who are the people who serve food? I think I would even go to the local Walmart and Target, because those managers have discretion over smaller grants, and they're more accessible, and they like this sort of thing. So those would be my places to start.
Great. We've got a question here from Samantha, Gail. Samantha's wondering, in regards to personal donations from the board, do you recommend setting a specific minimum amount, or just a give what you can policy?
Well, I like to say that every board member should make a proud personal gift every year. And I think the proud personal gift is an honest and caring way to call upon the board members to reach to their highest calling. Having said that, when I solicit board members, I like to put a number in front of them, that they're being asked for X amount of money. And also, I have varied the amount of money I was asking from board members before, based on their ability. So you can take one approach, which is that you keep secret the amount of money that you're soliciting from board members, and you do it individually based on their capacity. Or you can have the board members all agree that we need to all be responsible for $1,000 or something like that, and if we can't give it, we need to bring it in. That's the give-get. Now, there was a big discussion on Fun Chat. If anybody's on Twitter, hashtag Fun Chat yesterday, you can search for it. A bunch of us were talking about boards and about soliciting boards, and there was a lot of discussion about give-get policies. But I will say that the high-performing boards that I have worked with do have a give-get. And usually it goes for more prestigious and larger organizations that is a clear expectation that if I'm going on the board of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, it's going to cost me X or Y. And the smaller organizations are not at that place, and it may not be appropriate. So you're going to have to, it's got to be something that your board members themselves agree upon if you're going to do give-get. I'm careful about that because I don't want to be heavy-handed. I'm Southern, you know. Heavy-handed doesn't work as far as I'm concerned.
Gail, what's your opinion on having term limits for board members?
Please go to my blog, and pull out why your board needs term limits, that article, because if you do not have term limits, you are going to have energy on your board is not going to be refreshed. You're not going to have any new ideas. You're going to be in terrible danger of calcifying your strategies and your mission and not changing with times. And you're going to be in terrible danger of your board becoming a social club, a martyr club, like, oh, we work so hard, we're such martyrs, or we own this organization club, none of which puts the organization's mission first. It's all about us. So term limits are, and I'll tell you, I worked with a big-time board up in the New York City area, and this guy who was a huge investment banker on the board, you know what he said to me? He said, and get this is amazing, if we're ever going to get serious about fundraising, we have to have term limits. Yeah. Boom. So I can't be strong enough. And it's also part of every single list of good board practices that you will ever find is term limits. And I know it's hard. Oh, we can't find any new board members. Well, maybe you need to try harder or something's going on. You know, look at yourself about that. Yeah. Oh, thank you. You found the article. Great. That's a funny article. I was poking fun.
That's a great one.
Fun.
Gail, we've got a question from Anne, a really good question. When horses are your main tool of intervention, how do you convince donors that supporting the hay and grain and vet costs is equivalent to maintaining, you know, other overhead that another kind of nonprofit would have, maybe like the building or equipment?
Yeah, well, maybe you need to talk about adopting a horse. How much does it cost to maintain one horse? That might be more fun than paying for the hay. So maybe you need to look at what's most sellable, what's the sexiest. Oh, well, gosh, I'm underwriting the horse named Blaze. Isn't he beautiful? Here's a picture of him. I get a picture of him every time I make a gift. I can go out there and feed him apples or her apples. You know, hay and grain and vets don't sound as much fun to me as underwriting a horse. So maybe you need to package your costs differently would be my suggestion. There was another question in here about thank you letters I think I saw.
Yeah, Cynthia was wondering, do you have a recommendation for writing the best thank you letter after donation? I knew you would.
I do. Well, you know, listen, I've got several articles on my blog about thank you letters, but I think you need to wear your heart on your sleeve with that dang thank you letter. And Penelope Burke has got in her book, let me quote Penelope Burke's thank you letter, 5 lines. Dear Mrs. Carbuncle, you must have heard the shouts of joy in the hall when we received your gift of blankety blank underwriting the children's music program. We are so thrilled, or you can come see we're going to put your money to good use, blah, 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 and here's the person's name and phone number who directs the program. Excuse me. And we can't wait to give you a follow-up report about this project, and we want you to come down and visit us, something along that lines. So your thank you letter needs to be casual in tone. It needs to be warm. It needs to be personal. You need to ditch the lofty crap, institutional crap, and just be as warm and fuzzy and lovey-dovey as you can possibly be. And some organizations cannot bring themselves to do that because, we have to be formal. This is a very important nonprofit. But if you can make it personal, the donor's heart will go throb, 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 and they're going to love you more, and they'll probably give you more money. So that's my quick and dirty recommendation on thank you letters.
Love it. Well, we're about out of time. We probably have time for maybe one or two more questions. So I would encourage everyone listening along to send anything if you've been sitting on your hands or wondering something. You've got
I want to mention George wanted to know about resources for smaller nonprofits. A lot of my articles are very applicable to both large and small nonprofits because I'm dealing from you can see that I'm very practical and I'm very humanistic. Like, you can do this. This is not hard. And so any size organization can get a lot out of it. I also want to tell you that I do have a webinar series that I do from Fired Up Fundraising, my blog, and I bring the very, very best fundraising gurus in the world in to do a couple or 3 webinars a month. And it's a broad-based training program to educate you and your staff on fundraising. And we're doing basics, and we're also doing the latest twist on the basics, so that you don't need to. If you're going to implement a basic, you might as well implement the latest version of the basic, like the best way to do the thank you letter, the best way to do the internet web, the best way to do your major gift prospects and program, so that you can be more efficient and effective. I'm all about being efficient and effective, you know. Effective means we raise our money, and efficient means we save time doing it. Yay!
Yeah. Yeah, if you aren't following Gail on Twitter or reading her blog, you got to do that, because it's definitely one of the best in the sector.
Well, I just try to have some fun, you know. I try to be supportive and have some fun, you know. It comes out every Friday morning.
Yeah.
Avoid nonprofit jargon. Thank you, Richard, very much. Yeah.
Boo jargon. No jargon.
No jargon. Boo. I have a post called Words and Phrases Fundraisers Love to Hate, talking about jargon.
One here from Jenny. Do you have any resources specifically for nonprofit theater companies?
Listen, I have an arts background. You know, you've got people who love theater. Those are your people that you need to cultivate. You know, like I was a ballet dancer. I love ballet, and I also, my very first job was with the North Carolina Arts Council. I do anything in the world for anything in the arts. And so you need to find those passionate theater people, and you need to let them experience, you know, give them special experiences. Invite them to cast parties. Give them backstage tours during intermission. You know, give them some free acting classes. A lot of people in the arts think, oh, we can't raise money because we got hungry children. Listen, the people who are passionate about the arts, like I was an aspiring ballerina, and they gave me a tour backstage. When the Carolina Ballet did the Nutcracker, my girls and I got a backstage tour during intermission, and there they were. There was beautiful ballerinas. They're warming up. They're like ethereal, alien, and beautiful creature beings, and I'm going, you know, and they're people, and I'll never forget that experience. So you've got people who are that passionate about theater that you can give that experience to as well. So don't let anybody, I don't want anybody to say, oh, we can't raise money because our cause is not sexy. Because to your supporters, it is sexy.
Emma here was wondering, should the amount required of the board member contribution be related to the size of the budget or the number of members or both? Or what should they do there? Neither.
The amount of the required board member contribution needs to be, A, based on their capability, and B, based on whatever they agree that they should be doing. It's got to be a group. I remember there are 2 ways to do it. One way is to have your board members decide how much their expectation is going to be of each other, and the other way to do it is for you privately to solicit your board members based on their capacity. So I would not relate it to the budget. You know, some people say, oh, the board needs to be giving 10% of the budget, 20% of the budget. It depends on who you have on the board. You may not have the money in the seats, and you don't want to make people feel bad. If you know, it's up to you to go and list those people to join the board who can make those kind of gifts.
Yeah. I was talking to Jay yesterday, and he told a story of an organization that had Bill Gates on the board, and someone asked him for a donation, and Bill said, how much does everyone else give? And the fundraiser said about $75, and Bill said, okay, sign me up for $75. So they only got $75 out of Bill Gates based on what everyone else is doing. So I think
I would have made the case for explored his interest in what else, in funding a project. You know, you got to approach Bill Gates differently. You know, I'll say to Bill Gates, listen, everybody else is paying $75, but what do you think would be appropriate for you? Now, really, Bill.
Come on, Bill.
Now, really, now.
Well, cool. Well, we're about out of time. Gail, I want to give you the final word. This was just a lot of fun. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. Gail, just one last time, where can folks find you online? How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can send me an email at gp@gailperry.com, like we have got on the screen, or you can go to my website, firedupfundraising.com, or gailperry.com. I guess I need to put that on that little list. It's not, or you can Google me, Gail Perry Fundraising, and I'm afraid you're going to get a lot of hits because I've been blogging for so long.
Oh yeah, you'll find them.
But I love to hear from people. I respond to almost all emails unless they're really offbeat or weird. You know, people ask me a question or something. So I love to hear from people. And I am going to be sending you a follow-up email with PowerPoint and a couple of links.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. You'll get the slides from Gail, and I'll be sending out a recording here in the next couple hours, so you can relive this presentation with your board members if you like, or anyone else in your organization. Just so you know, we do these webinars once a week. They're totally free and totally educational. We've got some really cool ones coming up in the next couple weeks. Ann Payton's going to join us, and she's going to talk about how to develop a stewardship program. And then Kivy LaRue Miller is going to join us to talk about videos and infographics. So that'll be a really great presentation.
And listen, don't miss Kivy, because she's one of the leaders in the field, and she's amazing.
Yeah, that one's going to be really great. So check that out. Click our webinar page. Yeah, you should sit down on that, Gail. That'd be awesome.
I want to. Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, Gail,
everybody.
Thanks again. We will talk to you soon. So thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Okie dokie. Everybody take care and good luck, and onward to the cause, right? Onward, and may you get one idea from today and help put it to work so that things will shift in your organization and raise more money.
Right on.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.